driving it onto a beautifully colourful wooden boat on an azure blue lake in the north of Pakistan, Atabad Lake, is this most iconic image I think I could have taken.
Okay, so I think first things first, let's get it out of the way. Everyone who's watching this and me want to know that what is the best job in the world? What does a caretaker of the Hamilton Islands do, and what does that entail?
Well, I think when I was growing up in school, maybe I had a very different perception of what ultimately the best job in the world might be. And I think if you sort of do a Google search these days, you can find a multitude of different things, maybe 30 different ideas from, I don't know, chocolate tester to beer tester to trampoline tester. And one of them that pops up now, obviously, is the island caretaker. So the islands of the Great Barrier Reef. And that was the position that I was lucky enough or hardworking enough to manage to fulfill for about a year and a half back in 2009 and 2010. The role itself in those days was to get paid a decent salary to live in this beautiful villa on Hamilton Island, which is this beautiful tropical island off the coast of Queensland in Australia. And the job was for 6 months to travel the length of the Great Barrier Reef, this beautiful underwater playground of coral gardens and fish, and to document the adventures through, back in those days, the very early platforms of social media. So using Facebook, using Twitter, using the very, YouTube in its infancy, and documenting that story to tell it to a global audience through those platforms. So very, very different to what my original best job in the world might have looked like when I was maybe 10 or 12 years old. But now that I've been through it and done the best job in the world, it definitely was. It was an amazing, amazing experience.
And what does it look like now? Because now I see you're leading the best life in the world. So what is that like, as doing it as a career, basically?
So, yeah, I mean, this has always been a transition, really. We had such great opportunities that arose and such good publicity that came through the campaign of Best Job in the World that working with Tourism Queensland, who were the organisation who created the campaign in the first place and created this position, I then created a few more best of expeditions with them. So I've always been someone that's gone out and done some crazy sort of adventures for myself and from a very selfish perspective. Prior to Best Job in the World, I was driving an old Land Rover around the whole of the outside of Africa and throwing in a few mountains and marathons to do some fundraising on the way. So I suppose I've evolved my outlook on what my best next year looks like. And if there's a job involved in that and I can tie it into making money from it, even better. And so the best job in the world went to best expedition in the world. And then we created a concept called the best life in the world, which was a year-long journey, driving that same Land Rover all the way from Singapore through Asia, through India, into Europe and home to my parents in the UK. And that was really to find out what the common thread was between all of these amazing people that we met on the journey. Everybody that had a smile on their face, everybody that was a happy character, obviously had something that gave them that vitality in life. So to find out what their best life looked like and find out what those parts were and run a website all about those experiences. So best life in the world then led us to find some epic locations on that journey. One of them being in the very north of your country, in the north of India, in Ladakh, to go and do the world's highest road from Manali up to Leh in the mountains. And we found these amazing locations and thought on the way back, well, if after 20 years of travel, Sophie and I have found these places that still make us go, wow, if there is a business out there that we can create based around adventure travel that takes people to these locations in the world, it's a pretty good business model. So that then developed our company, Best Life Adventures. And we've now been running that since 2017. And prior to all of this problem pandemic that's taken the world by storm, we were traveling the globe, taking people to epic locations. And now I know it's not a bad one, but we're restricted to doing these things in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds really amazing, but I want to understand. So how does Ben, from being an automotive design system degree person to an event manager, get to doing all, being, as you beautifully put it, an adventure advocate?
It was never a path I planned. It was never something that's, been a pipeline of journey for me to travel from part 1 to part 2 to part 3. Only in the last 2 or 3 years have I started to develop a life plan, a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan. It was always, let's go out there, see what happens. Who knows what's around the next corner? But if you can put yourself in situations where you push yourself as an individual and you develop yourself from a physical, mental, and career perspective, opportunities happen and doors open. And as long as you work hard and surround yourself with the people that you want to be like and see aspiration and motivation coming from, it really starts to then lay tracks for you almost, week by week, month by month, year by year. And obviously, the older you get, the more responsibilities you pick up. You sort of develop maybe a mortgage, and you maybe get a kid or a number of them. And those responsibilities mean that you've got to have a little bit more of a plan. But since, leaving university in 1997 with a degree in engineering, I've never used that degree once, apart from keeping my very old Land Rover running on the road. So I think university and being able to apply myself for that 3-year window was proof to myself and any future employers that I could stick it out. And if I gave myself a project I was passionate about, I could see it through to the end and make it successful. And I think since 1997, my life has just been about making the next project feasible, delivering it, and making it then a valuable asset that I can use on my resume, and that future employers can see, okay, this is the sort of person who would be a valuable asset to be with us and working for us.
Yeah, but I also wanted to understand how, that leap of faith happened from doing, I think you were an event manager or something to do with marketing, and then you're doing the best job in the world. That's a huge, it was the whole process of application. But it's a huge leap of faith that you took to go out there. And some of our viewers want to take that leap of faith and can't. So I want to understand how that happened with you.
So I'm going to pipe back to my first, I suppose, job overseas as an event manager. So I was working for a champagne company who sponsored a number of the sports events in the UK. So the Formula One motor racing at Silverstone and the tennis at Wimbledon. So I was working for them as an event manager, basically setting up a big hospitality area, managing some of the events and the sponsorship with them on the ground. So it was very much just a basic day-to-day job during the summer months in England from May to September. And it was only when I got to the end of that summer window that the company said to me, look, we like the way you work with us. We like what you've done for us so far. There's an opportunity to go and work for us in Cape Town in South Africa doing the round the world yacht race. So that was my first big step overseas, and really a doorway that opened for me because I put in the hard work and the hard yards, working, in my own country, doing fairly long hours for an acceptable salary, nothing amazing. And that job then led to this opportunity in South Africa. And it was only when I really got my first overseas trip to South Africa that I started to realize how wonderful other areas of the world were outside of my own normal parameters, which was the UK and Northwest Europe. I hadn't gone much further than that. I hadn't seen the opportunity that countries and continents like Africa offered. So with the money I'd made through the English event management company, I stayed for an extra 4 months in South Africa and traveled for a bit. And it was at that stage the travel bug, I really caught the travel bug, a healthy travel bug in those days, not like COVID, and a bug which then gave me the opportunity to go, okay, I'm enjoying this lifestyle where I can earn money and then go and spend it doing something that is not necessarily a standard path through life as an occupation, but it gives me life experience. And that life experience is something that is very hard to put a financial value on, but it builds your confidence as an individual. It's just very hard to take that first step, that first leap to go, I'm going to go and do this. And maybe I'll leave family behind and I'll leave the current job, which I'm comfortable in, but not feeling any motivation from. So taking that first leap of faith to go to Africa was a big thing for me. But as soon as I'd done it, I realized the value in going back to the UK, earning money, then out to Africa to spend the money to go and better myself as an individual. And it was during those trips that I took to Africa, I then rented a 4-wheel drive vehicle with some friends and did sort of 2-week road trips up to Mozambique and back to South Africa, and then up to Namibia and back to South Africa, and up to Botswana and back to South Africa. And every time I was doing these little trips, I was realizing how enjoyable and how good fun and how valuable to me as an individual going off and doing a self-planned, self-funded trip into a part of the country or the part of the world I wasn't confident in, built my love and my passion for doing an overland journey. And to do it in, look, let's hark back to India, to go and do an overland journey. It's a rite of passage almost for an Indian male and a lot of females these days to get a Royal Enfield motorbike and head up into the Himalayas. Some people will say it's easy to go and do. Other people will say, oh, I could never go and do that. And it's the ones that take that leap and take that chance to go, maybe I can strap my life on the back of my bike for 3 weeks and just go and see what happens. And doing those journeys gave me this overall concept of, okay, one day I'm not going to fly from England to South Africa for this job. I'm going to drive to South Africa. And it's a big undertaking. You know, it's through some of the most problematic countries in the world, some that are very difficult, certainly today, to travel through, maybe less so in the days when I did it back in 2007. But to go and do that journey and to give myself a sort of 3-year window to say, okay, this is the date I'm going to leave on from England. So I set myself a line in the sand. I drew that date as being the 27th of December, 2007. And I said, that's the day I will leave my family in the Land Rover. I'm going to take a year to drive all the way to South Africa, down the west coast of Africa, and all the way back up the east coast to get back to London. So this was a 3-year plan based on my passion for overland travel, my love of Africa, and the ability to want to do a project that was valuable for me and not standard for my resume. So to make it a fundraising activity, to set myself some physical challenges on the way, so to climb the 5 highest mountains in Africa and to run 5 marathons, but to self-fund it, to make it something that raises at least $50,000 for charity. And so when I get back to England, I haven't just had a gap year where I've done nothing that a future employer would see value in, but to come back having planned, funded and executed a life journey such as this would be a really good thing for any future employer to look at the resume and go, okay, this person's a go-getter. Why not bring them on to our company or our organization? To be honest with you, I probably didn't want a full-time job when I got back after that. So a week after I got back, the advert for the best job in the world went out around the world. And it was just perfect timing that I got back from this, 3-year plan journey that I'd taken a year to execute. And all of a sudden, Tourism Queensland were looking for someone who could go on an adventure and document their journey as they went. And naturally, I'd just been doing that in Africa.
Yeah, so I mean, that sounds like a beautiful story. I want to understand what before all this happened, unfortunately, what was a day like in the best life in the world? What was your day usually like before, obviously, Corona happened and all of this happened?
So what, rewind, say a year maybe?
Yeah, let's say a year.
So let's say a year. So we look back, Best Life Adventures, we've now been running since 2016. For me, I've always taken great pride and value in planning my own expeditions and adventures. I'm not a package deal sort of guy. I couldn't just rock up and get on a cruise ship. I need to be looking at a map and laying it out on the table. I need to be building an itinerary. I need to be looking at get out of jail clauses and in case things go wrong. And I need to make sure I've mapped out adventures. So for me, turning that passion for building itineraries for myself into building itineraries for other people to come on these adventures, to pay me as the company expedition director to go and lead them, and to come back as clients fulfilled and having had the most epic adventure. That was my day to day. That's exactly what I've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years, is building these adventures that are not found in any tourist brochure, that are very different and off the cuff, that are low numbers, maybe slightly higher price points than other companies, but are very, very unique in what they offer. That's what my best job was always going to be. In my dreams, it was running a travel company, but I never thought I'd get there. And the best job in the world gave me that springboard to have a bit of public profile. That means people are curious about me as a travel person to go with and, to lead their expeditions. I did have a 5-year plan a year ago that's probably been thrown on the fire a little bit with all COVID going on. But that was that I would be not necessarily delivering the expeditions as a guide on the ground, but having other people come to me and work for me as my guide. And I am the one who's here at home in Australia and maybe leading 2 or 3 signature expeditions every year, but I've got other people leading the bulk of them. So obviously with international travel being slashed as it has been in the last few months, that model has sort of taken a back seat. And for now, we're just curating expeditions within Australia for Australians, because that's the safe one we can do. And then as we start to hopefully eventually find a vaccine and open up, international borders again, we can start to re-look at the idea of being an expedition, maybe not an expedition guide.
So if I let's say I take one of these adventures, what a year back when this wasn't there, what would an average adventure look like? I mean, I call it average, but it's absolutely not the average. What would that look like? Like if I'm part of or something?
Yeah, good question. I think I like to be able to roll out a different line of adventures. So we have our signature expeditions, and we also have our extreme dreams challenges. The signature expeditions are things that I have been and done myself, but I know we can do better. Or I've seen someone else, like, again, let's use the Manali to Leh road. I saw a cyclist going up that road as we were driving it in the Land Rover. At the time, I said to Sophie, my wife, wouldn't it be amazing to come back and cycle this road at some point? So to have the idea in my head to then develop into a plan that I can deliver to other people, that's one of our sort of entry-level signature expeditions. That's trekking to Everest Base Camp. That is driving four-wheel drives across the Simpson Desert in Australia. So they're things that I've loved doing, but know that we can do better than other companies that are out there. That's our signature expeditions. And then sort of our top-level expeditions are the Extreme Dreams challenges. And they're the things that I've always had in my head, but never gone and done myself. So if I can produce a crazy expedition that makes me feel excited, I know that if I can find 12 paying clients who are brave or maybe stupid enough to come and do it with me, it's a good business model, and it's something that is about as whack and out there as you can find. So we've sort of got these different levels of expedition. The ones that excite me more, obviously, are the Extreme Dreams challenges, because we've never done them. So everything is new and novel when we get out there. But the signature expeditions are ones where we can roll them out year on year on year, knowing there's a market out there, but we do it differently and have a very different, unique selling point from other companies out there.
Right. So I'll just move on to this. I think a lot of every one of us has some love and admiration for nature, and we all like to go on a good holiday and do these adventures. But for someone who wants to make a career out of doing this, how do you think they start, or at which is a good starting point for this journey?
I mean, I was very lucky to have got a leg up that the best job in the world gave me. There were 35,000 people that went for it, and I never thought I was going to get the position. But then, having got it, that media profile that it created gave me much more leverage to get publicity and marketing for future trips that we were doing. It was only through going out there and being risk taking enough to create my own expeditions that I was able to find partners and sponsors and companies that would back the adventures we were doing. You don't just rock up to it. I remember before I did my first Africa trip, I walked up to maybe 20 or 30 companies' front doors and said, look, I'm going to go and do this drive around Africa. And I remember one of them coming back and saying, but who are you? You've got no profile. Why are we back just an individual, a private individual who's coming to us to get sponsorship and money? That first stepping stone is the hardest one to take from a building a profile perspective. So to go out there and do it now, if I was going to redo that journey, I think building up a passion for the great outdoors, building up an experience list and a qualifications list for yourself as an individual is one of the best routes you can take. To go out there and get your wilderness first aid, to prove that you can work at elevation up in the mountains, to prove you can do the cold stuff in the mountains or the Arctic. All of those are non-standard qualifications which build your profile as an individual and prove that you can survive more than other people might do in those situations. And as a guide who's up at Everest Base Camp, who's walking through the jungle, you can't be the one that fails. You can't be the one that gets ill or the one that gets sick. So you've got to prove yourself in these different environments to build that confidence in yourself, to be understanding enough of the problems that can occur and how you will deal with them when they do occur. And I think that sort of builds this plethora of experiences, which builds a resume. And it's not, you can't necessarily get it as a degree. Again, it's building life experiences that chart you along that roadmap that get you to that destination. And sometimes, it's definitely harder graft than most people will be willing to put in.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you a question that I think a lot of people might have. So it's been 13, 15 years of what we can call the best life in the world. But if I were to force you to choose one moment which you would say was the best moment in the world, what would that be?
Oh, there's a lot to choose from, and you can go from the ones that happen in nature or the people you met along the way. I think a big thing for me is conversations with people. I love being able to sit and talk to anybody, whether it's sitting next to them on a plane or whether it's bumping into them, late at night in a cafe, in a town or country I've never been to. So people interactions is really important to me. One of the most iconic photos that I've got of any story that is actually a lake in the north of Pakistan. So my best friend for the last 20 years has been my Land Rover. It seems a bit weird, but Colonel Mustard has been a big part of my life. And together we've driven around Africa, we've driven across, all half of the world. So I've been through 70 countries with that vehicle. I've driven over 250,000 kilometers in it. So it's got a really big part of my life in there since 2003, I suppose. That vehicle, driving it onto a beautifully colourful wooden boat on an azure blue lake in the north of Pakistan, Atabad Lake, is this most iconic image I think I could have taken ever of me standing atop the Land Rover with my hands up here. It actually made one of Instagram's top photos of the year in a book they published. So that was probably the moment where so many years of hard work had culminated in getting to that moment. This was raw, unplanned travel in a country that many people, would consider unsafe to travel through, in a part of the world that's only just, come out of big problems and conflict. So to get up there with my wonderful wife, Sophie, to get onto this lake and to realize that we weren't going to be stuck in the country, we could move on through China. That was years of personal development and planning and disaster mitigation that had got us to that point to continue our journey. So I think that, probably about the 27th of August 2015 was that moment of, wow, all of this hard work for the last 15 years has really been worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, I saw your blog and your page. If I couldn't choose from all of that, so I had to ask you this question because you've just led such an amazing life. I wanted to ask you that I think everyone loves this. Like, there was this whole huge marketing campaign of best job in the world, and sort of everyone loved the job, and I saw Sky News reporting that they can see nothing bad about the job. But I'm sure there are some obstacles and sort of road bumps that you face while doing the best job in the world. So can you tell our viewers something that you faced even now as an adventurer, or back then while you were an island caretaker? What are the obstacles in this sort of life?
Absolutely. I always, so you sort of get asked the question, what was the worst thing about the best job in the world, is always a good question. For me, and I don't think it would have been for a lot of people, the best job in the world was really the busiest job in the world, because Tourism Queensland saw it as a really big opportunity to market. It was selling a product. It was selling an adventure holiday on the islands of the Great Barrier Reef. That was the whole concept. So when the final of the best job in the world happened, there were about 70 different film crews from all around the world that were out there covering the event live. They were seeing, who was going to be the lucky finalist to win this job. And it was being streamed to TV and news shows in the US and Canada and India and Japan, and all these countries around the world were featuring it. And it was in the last 3 days leading up to that final that the 16 finalists were sort of realizing, okay, this is not sitting in a hammock, reading a book, relaxing on a beach, which most people's best job in the world would be. It's doing very little and just having a holiday. The more we got towards the final, the more I realized that this is a real job, and Tourism Queensland are going to milk every last drop of publicity they can out of this campaign. So it's going to be the busiest job in the world. It's not just the best job in the world. You're going to be run ragged for 6 months, the length of the contract. So the realization for a few of those finalists was, okay, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I don't want to be ridiculously hardworking, but I'm slightly hyperactive. Maybe I have a slight bit of ADHD. I like to channel my hyperactivity into something that is valuable. And as today, as it was on that day of, the final of best job in the world, that started the point where I really started my career. Because before then I'd been doing hard work, but it had been fun work. But this was really, this is going to be enjoyable work. You're building a public profile, but it's going to be 24/7. So, over that window of 6 months, I think there was 320 odd media interviews that I was doing. I was presenting a series for Nat Geo, for the National Geographic Adventure Channel. I was hosting media at the house every day. I visited 62 islands in 6 months. So it wasn't this sit back, relax, enjoy. It was, okay, here's your itinerary. This is what you're going to do today. And there's 20 items on here. Plus you need to write a blog. Plus you need to edit the photos. Plus you need to create the video. And that's really, sort of continued unabated. It's a lifestyle I certainly enjoy. I think now that I'm a dad of a 3-year-old, being able to take time out from being on with my nose to the grindstone 24/7 is an extremely valuable thing. And for all the bad that the coronavirus has delivered us, it's also delivered us a headspace of, okay, I don't need to have my foot on the accelerator all the time. People aren't traveling at the moment. I don't really have a travel company. So I've got more time at home. I've got more time with my family. I've got more time with my little boy. So that busy